The Civil War produced remarkable military leaders on both sides whose strategic decisions and battlefield prowess shaped America's bloodiest conflict. In the Union Army, Ulysses S. Grant emerged from obscurity to become Lincoln's most trusted general, employing a relentless approach that leveraged the North's superior resources while accepting casualties that would have been unthinkable to his predecessors. Grant's fondness for whiskey was so legendary that when critics complained to Lincoln about his drinking, Honest Abe reportedly quipped, "Find out what brand he drinks, because I want to send a barrel to my other generals." His Vicksburg campaign, where he boldly cut loose from his supply lines and maneuvered between two Confederate armies, showed the kind of gambling instinct usually reserved for someone with 4 aces and nothing to lose. George McClellan, Lincoln's first general-in-chief, had a case of battlefield stage fright so severe he could turn victory into procrastination faster than a college student with an essay due. His reluctance to pursue Lee after Antietam had Lincoln famously asking if he could borrow the army if McClellan wasn't using it. McClellan's troops adored him, probably because he rarely asked them to face actual danger. His intelligence reports consistently overestimated Confederate strength, suggesting he believed the South had apparently cloned their soldiers between battles. William Tecumseh, Sherman's innovative and devastating scorched earth campaigns through Georgia and the Carolinas, pioneered modern total warfare, essentially serving the South an all-you-can-burn buffet. Sherman's famous quote, "War's hell," was probably uttered by Southerners first upon seeing him approach. His flaming march to the sea ensured Atlanta had urban renewal way before it was trendy. Sherman's distinctive appearance, red hair, rusty beard, and perpetually rumpled uniform made him look like he'd just rolled out of bed after a rough night, ready to set fire to your hometown. Philip Sheridan, all 5'5" of him, proved that battlefield ferocity doesn't require height. His aggressive cavalry tactics in the Shenandoah Valley crippled the Confederate breadbasket so thoroughly that he boasted a crow would need to pack a lunch to fly over it. At Cedar Creek, he rallied his retreating army after a 20-mile ride, turning defeat into victory. The 19th century equivalent of showing up late to the party, but still managing to be the life of it. Union General George Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga, moved so methodically, his troops probably grew beards, waiting for orders. Yet his precision saved the Union Army from complete disaster more than once. At Nashville, he took so long to attack that Grant was traveling to relieve him of command when Thomas finally struck and obliterated Confederate General John Bell Hood's army, the military equivalent of turning in your homework just as the teacher was about to give you an F. Winfield Scott Hancock, the superb Union general, was so handsome and gallant that even his enemies complimented him. Imagine being so good-looking that people shooting at you still take time to admire your bone structure. His defensive stand at Cemetery Ridge during Pickett's charge was as solid as his jawline. Meanwhile, Union General Benjamin Butler was so detested in New Orleans that ladies would empty chamber pots in his direction, giving new meaning to the phrase public opinion. On the Confederate side, Robert E. Lee's defensive genius and audacious maneuvering repeatedly frustrated larger Union forces, earning him near mythical status despite ultimate defeat. Lee was so revered that Southern mothers probably named their children, pets, and favorite chairs after him. His immaculate uniform and dignified bearing stood in stark contrast to Grant's disheveled appearance, the original dress for the job you want versus the job you have meme. Lee's Second Manassas campaign, where he divided his army in the face of a superior force, would have given most generals a heart attack, but for Lee, it was just Tuesday. Thomas Stonewall Jackson, until his accidental death by friendly fire, displayed an unmatched ability to execute rapid marches and surprise attacks that bewildered his opponents. Jackson earned his nickname at First Bull Run for standing like a stone wall. Though his eccentric habits, like sucking on lemons, raising his arm to balance his bodily fluids, and refusing to season his food because it would excite his passion, suggest he might have been more oddball than Stonewall in person. His Shenandoah Valley campaign, where he defeated 3 separate Union armies while outnumbered 4-1, was the 19th century equivalent of winning 3 simultaneous chess matches while doing your taxes. James Longstreet, Lee's old war horse, advocated for defensive strategies that might have served the South better had they been more widely adopted. After Pickett's disastrous charge at Gettysburg, which Longstreet had opposed, Lee admitted his error with, "It's all my fault," perhaps the most expensive "my bad" in American history. Longstreet's post-war friendship with Grant and support for Reconstruction earned him the unique distinction of being hated by many Southerners more than actual Union generals. Talk about a tough crowd. Nathan Bedford Forrest, with no formal military education, proved a natural cavalry commander whose dictum, "to get there first with the most men," reflected his intuitive grasp of tactics. Forrest's colorful, often profane language and limited education made him the Civil War equivalent of that uncle at Thanksgiving, who has no filter but somehow always wins at poker. His ability to use terrain and surprise made him the boogeyman of Union supply lines, though his role in the Fort Pillow massacre and post-war Klan activities ensured his legacy would be as controversial as a political discussion at a family reunion. Confederate Cavalry General J.E.B. Stuart rode around Union armies with such flair and fancy uniforms that he was essentially the 19th century version of a peacock with J.E.B. until Sheridan's troops finally caught up with him in 1864. Stuart's plumed hat and cape made him a walking target, yet he survived numerous battles, only to be mortally wounded at Yellow Tavern, perhaps proving that fashion can indeed be fatal. Confederate General A.P. Hill, known for his aggressive tactics and distinctive red battle shirt, had the unusual distinction of being mentioned in the final words of both Lee and Jackson, making him the Civil War equivalent of that friend everyone remembers in their big moments. Confederate General John Bell Hood, who lost the use of an arm at Gettysburg and a leg at Chickamauga, yet kept fighting, embodied the phrase, "It's just a flesh wound," long before Monty Python made it famous. His increasingly reckless attacks in the Atlanta campaign and disastrous Tennessee campaign suggested he was trying to collect the complete set of major injuries. Union General Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, a former college professor, led the crucial defense of Little Round Top at Gettysburg with an academic's attention to detail and a berserker's courage. When out of ammunition, he ordered a bayonet charge downhill, effectively turning a desperate last stand into the world's most terrifying pop quiz for the attacking Confederates. Union General John Sedgwick's last words at Spotsylvania were reportedly, "They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance," followed immediately by the sound of a Confederate sharpshooter, proving him spectacularly wrong. Confederate General Jubal Early's defense of the Shenandoah Valley earned him the nickname Old Jubilee, though Union troops facing him probably weren't celebrating. After the war, Early became such a dedicated Lost Cause proponent that he refused to take the oath of allegiance to the United States, instead fleeing to Mexico and Canada, proving that some people really don't know when to fold 'em. Union General Governor K. Warren saved the day at Gettysburg by recognizing the importance of Little Round Top, only to be controversially relieved by Sheridan at Five Forks years later, the Civil War version of getting fired right before the company's big success. Union General Ambrose Burnside's spectacular facial hair launched a style, Sideburns, that would outlive his military reputation, which took a devastating hit at Fredericksburg in a battle plan so bad it could have been drawn up by a sleepy kindergartner. His troops charged uphill against entrenched positions behind a stone wall, demonstrating that sometimes tactics boil down to, let's run directly into the bullets and hope they get tired of shooting us. Confederate General Braxton Bragg was so argumentative, he once reportedly held a debate with himself while simultaneously serving as both company commander and quartermaster, and lost the argument. His victory at Chickamauga was one of the few times the Confederacy won, despite Bragg rather than because of him, as he failed to pursue the retreating Union Army, essentially finding the keys to victory and then promptly losing them in the couch cushions. The war also featured naval innovations like ironclad ships, with the battle between the Monitor and Merrimac looking like two bathtubs fighting while wearing armor. Union Admiral David Farragut's famous order at Mobile Bay, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead," demonstrated either incredible courage or a serious misunderstanding of how torpedoes work. Confederate Admiral Raphael Semmes, commanding the CSS Alabama, captured or destroyed sole 5 Union merchant vessels, making him the 19th century equivalent of a one-man Amazon package thief. And we can't forget Union General Joseph Hooker, whose name became associated with certain ladies of the evening after his troops' infamous camp followers, proving that in war, even your legacy might not be what you intended. His bold plan at Chancellorsville turned to disaster when Lee and Jackson outflanked him, sending Hooker into such a state of confusion that a Confederate artillery shell striking his headquarters probably improved his tactical thinking. Union General George Meade, who took command of the Army of the Potomac just 3 days before Gettysburg, had a temper so legendary his troops nicknamed him Old Snapping Turtle. His victory at Gettysburg was followed by a failure to pursue Lee's retreating army, prompting Lincoln to write him a letter so passive-aggressive it could have been framed in the Smithsonian exhibit on disappointed parents. These generals' triumphs and failures, brilliance and blunders, shaped not just the outcome of the Civil War, but the entire future of the United States, all while providing enough material for history teachers to keep students awake for generations to come. Their legacies remind us that even in America's darkest hour, there was room for both tremendous courage and absurd comedy, often from the same people wearing really impressive hats.